Hello and assalamu alaikum students. Welcome to the course Programming Language Concept. In today's lecture, we're going to talk about passing arguments to a function. We will also see that how many ways are there so that we can pass value to or pass arguments to function. So this is the topic of today's session, passing arguments to a function. Now, first of all, we will see that what is argument or what is parameter. The arguments basically the mechanism to convey information to a function that is called arguments or parameters. So basically, argument is what that is. It is a kind of mechanism through which we can convey or pass information to any function. This information might be in the form of values, or it might be in the form of the address of variables, or it may be simple variables. So if a function needs some value and that is not present in that function, so we can transfer that value to the function from another function in the same program with the help of arguments. Remember, it is just like the arguments, or just like, if you remember, we have used a string copy function or the string comparison function, in which we basically pass two strings. So passing strings, they are what? They are basically passing information. If something is not available, if some value is needed by any function and that value is not present in that function, so we can pass it through another function to the function. So any number of arguments can be passed to a function, but must be specified in both in the function definition as well as in the prototype. Remember, you have to keep this thing in your mind. You can pass any number of arguments, or you can pass any number of parameters, but keep this one thing in your mind, that this must be specified in both the function definition as well as in the prototype. So this is a very simple program for the arguments or the parameter. This is a simple example. Let's try to work on this simple program. And so as usual, you need to include the header file. Okay, include using name space std. Okay, and then after this, what you need to do, you need to declare two variables. Okay, sorry, you need to declare function. So for the function, what we need to do, we need to first of all write the return value or the return type of the function, that is void, and then the name of the function. And then what does this mean? Here we have basically filled the parentheses, okay, with two integer and integer. It means that we are going to pass integer value from the main function to the function mul. Okay, you can also specify its variable. Okay, but if you don't want to specify it here, then better to leave it as it is. Okay, like int end. It means that you are telling the compiler that the function name is mul, the return type is void, and we are going to pass two integer values. Okay, these values can also be float. Okay, for example, float values. Okay, so we are going to write the float. Fine. So this time what we do is we are passing two values, and those values would be of type a float. Okay, from the main function. Now here what we do is we are basically writing the main function. So in the main function, we are going to declare two float variables. Now we need to print a message to the user. Please enter a value. Okay, what the user would do, the user would basically enter a value. Okay, that value will be stored in variable a, and then we're going to print another message for the user. Please enter second value. Okay, second value. In here we are going to print please enter first value. Okay, so first value and second value. Now the second value will be stored in B. After this, we are going to pass these two values, okay, the float values, to function mul. when we are calling the function, okay, remember this is how we call the function. We have to write the name of the function. The name of the function is MUL, and then parenthesis. Remember, we need to pass a and b to this MUL function. So far we have not written the definition of MUL function, so we are going to pass a and b to the value of a, or the photocopy of a and b into MUL function. So let's try to write the definition here. Fine. Now the definition of the function MUL is like this: integer x, okay, and integer y. Remember, this is the definition. So we have to declare variable in the parenthesis. It means that the values that we are going to pass, okay, to this MUL function. So for this reason, we need to declare variables. So all the value that have been passed from the main function should be stored in some variables of the MUL function. Now here, what we did, we basically passed the value of a and b. So the value of a will be passed and it will be stored in x. The value of b will be passed to MUL function and will be stored in y. So in the MUL function, what I'm going to do, I'm not going to declare these values again, but instead I will declare a simple variable that is going to hold the result of the multiplication of x into y. Fine. So this means that we have passed two values, okay. We can write a statement like x. First of all, we are going to print the value of x, and then print the value of y, and then print the result after multiplication of x with y. So the result is basically stored in m. That's why we will write the m here. Now how this program works? First of all, we basically declare a function. This is the function prototype. Here we have passed two arguments, okay. It means we are telling the compiler that, look, we are going to pass two float values to this MUL function, okay. So in the main function, what we did, we declared two variables in order to hold the values and then pass these values to the MUL function. So we declared a value will be stored, first value will be stored in a, second value will be stored in b, and then we are actually passing these values, okay. We are passing these values to MUL function like this. In the argument, okay, we have written a and b. So it means that the value of a and b will be passed to this function when this function is going to be called. So when the compiler encounters this statement, okay, what happens? There will be a call to this MUL, so the control will transfer. X will receive the value of a, y will receive the value of b, and then integer m. So x, which is the value of a, whatever you have entered there, will be multiplied with value of b, whatever you have entered there. So this will print us the value of x as well as the value of I, and then the value of the result after multiplication of x into y. So let's try to run this program and see the result on the screen. There is, I don't know what sort of mistakes is there. MUN float, okay, yeah, remember we did a small mistake here, because here we have specified the data type as float, but here what we did, we basically wrote integer, okay. So keep in mind, you have to use the same data type for your variable as you have defined here, because then you will be faced with such problems, okay. So we are also going to change this float to the float. Now let's try to run this program. Here you can see, please enter first value. Now where is the control? The control is here in this A. Fine. So now this message is printed. Now the control is in B. So we are going to input value for B. This, okay, 7, we are going to write 3.5 in B. So what happens? 3.5 in B will be stored, Now we are passing 5.5 in A and 3.5 in B to these variables and function definition x and y. So x is going to receive 5.5, B is going to receive 3.5, and then we have declared a variable in order to store the result of both the x multiply y. So whatever the result would be, that would be stored on the screen. You can see this is the result, 5.5 multiplied 3.5, that's equal to 19.25. So this is the result after the multiplication of the two numbers. This is called the arguments, okay? So arguments is what? Argument is basically the mechanism of conveying information. If some values are not present in a function, so we can pass those values from any other function to that particular function. For example, in this case, you can see that we don't have the values for the calculation. So what we did, we basically passed some values from the main function, and then these values are passed to this function. You can also send values directly like this, okay? Without specifying like float this, okay? You can directly send the float values, okay? Let's assume 3.5. Fine. So 3.5, 5.5 will be sent to x, 3.5 will be received by y, and then you will have the same result on the screen. You can see the same result is there on the screen, okay? So there are multiple ways through which you can send values to a particular function. Fine, so now another important thing that you have to keep in your mind, we have actual arguments and we have formal arguments. The arguments in function called, they are called as actual argument. The argument in the function definition, this is called as formal arguments. Fine, so this is formal arguments, and these are the A and B, which is in function call, they are called the actual arguments. Keep these things in your mind. Now, the points about some of the important points about the arguments. So, what is argument? The mechanism to convey information to a function from outside. Because in the example that you just saw, we basically conveyed some values, okay, from main function. Main function was outside to MUL function. So this is known as arguments or parameters. We must specify the number of arguments in the function definition and just need to write the data types in of each argument in the prototype. Like here, if we go back to the example, here we need to the arguments, we must specify the number of arguments in the function definition and just need to write the data type. So here we specified the number of arguments, okay, in the function definition. This is called the specification or declaration of the arguments, okay. But here in the function definition, we only wrote the data type, okay. So in function declaration or in function prototype, we only specify the data type of the values that we are going to pass to the function, but here we have to specify the arguments properly. Fine. Moving forward, okay, the arguments in the function definition are called formal arguments, while those in the function calling are known as actual arguments. Keep these things in your mind. The actual argument are those in the function calling. For example, if there is any argument, okay, so this is actual argument and this is called the formal argument. Fine. Moving forward to the other point, any number of arguments can be passed to a function, but the number and data type of actual and formal argument must always be the same. Now keep this thing in your mind that you can pass any number of arguments, but again the number and data type of actual and a formal argument must always be the same. For example, if you have declared two variables as integer, okay, integer a and b, okay, and then you are passing this a and b here, okay, even you are basically sending a new value. So this would give you an error because the data type of ABC is what? That is integer, while the data type of these arguments and formal arguments or what, they are float. Okay, similarly they are 2, but here you have passed 3 arguments, so the numbers are different as well as the data type is different. Fine, keep this thing in your mind. Now the compiler treat the actual and formal argument as different variable. Remember, this is known as the actual argument. Suppose we have the float a and b, okay, and in a we stored 5.5, and in b we stored 3.5, okay, 3.5. So what we do here, we are basically passing these a and b to this mul function, okay, the value of a and b arguments. Fine. So here this is called actual argument and this is called formal argument. Now let's go back to the slide to see the compiler treat the actual and formal argument as different variables. Remember, the scope of these variables is only limited to the main function, and the scope of x and y variable is only limited to this mul function. It means that a and b can only be accessed in main function, while x and y can only be accessed in mul function, okay, because they are stored at different location. Fine. Even if you, for example, if you write here a, okay, a and b, remember then this a and b is different than the variables that we declared here in main function, okay. You can also write this thing, it is not going to affect our result, okay. So this is what we mean, that this a is different than this a, this b is different than this b, which is declared in the main function, because the scope of ab in main function is only limited to the main function. It means we can only access this ab of main function in main function. We cannot access this ab outside this main function. So the same goes for this ab as well. Fine, because they are two different variables. Keep this thing in your mind. We can use the same name for actual and formal arguments, but still the compiler will treat them as different variables internally, and thus will reserve different spaces for the formal arguments. Like here in this case, I have used the same name for both the actual argument as well as for the formal arguments, okay. So the compiler will treat them different variables, okay. For compiler, these two are different variables because they are declared inside the main function, and this is declared inside the mul function. That's why they will be treated treated differently. Anything can be passed as an argument, either simple variable or array or a whole structure. You can pass anything like array, you can pass a structure, or you can pass a simple variable. So you need to keep these things in your mind about the point about the arguments. Fine. So another important thing in the function, that is the use of the return statement. Now what is return statement? If we specify the type of function, then we must put a valid return statement at the end of function definition. Now specify mean if we specify the data type of the function. So far we only work with void. It means that the function is not going to return any value to the main function. That's why we only specify void as a data type, but we can also return some value to the main function. Now in that case we have to use the return statement. So return statement performs the two tasks. It returns the control back to the calling function, okay, to the calling function. For example, in this case the calling function is main, so it returns the control back to the main function, and it also returns the value present immediately after the return statement. So let's try to write a program, okay. This time I'm going to remove this stuff, okay. I'm going to remove all this function definition. So let's try to declare a function first. Okay, this time we're going to use the integer as a return type of the function. So we're going to return the square. Okay, we're going to return the square of a number, or the square of a number, and we are not going to pass any value to the square function. So first of all, what we do is, this is the function definition. We have defined the function, okay, and here in the function we have declared the function. We did not define the function. We wrote the prototype. Integer is the return type, and then square is the name. After this, we need to define the function here. Remember, function header in the function definition should be same as function declaration. Okay, so except that we do not put the semicolon here. Instead, we write the curly brackets. Fine. So we are going to declare a simple variable like is. Okay, and then we're going to ask the user, please enter value. Okay, please enter value in s, or please enter value for square. Okay, so what we do, we are going to use this s variable. Okay, and then we are going to use the return statement. Now return, it is a keyword. Okay, that's why you can see the color of this return is changed. So return is into is. Now where to return? Remember, where we are returning a value. Okay, this message will be printed. User will enter a value, for example 5. So 5 will be stored in is. Here 5 into 5, that would be 25. So with the help of return statement, first of all, the control will returns back to the main function, back to the calling function, because we are going to call the square function from main function. And similarly, it's going to return a single value, which is 25, back to the main function. So this is how we write this function. Therefore, we need to declare a variable so that the value which is returned from the square function should be stored in that variable. Okay, so res, and then we need to use the function call. Okay, when we call the function, what happens? The activity of the main function will be stopped here. Okay, and the control will transfer to the square function. Okay, all the statements will be executed, and then the function is going to calculate the square of this number, and then with the help of return statement, control will transfer to the return statement. Okay, with a single value, let's assume that is 25. 25 is stored in res, so we can write something like return result, or square is what? Square is res. Find result. So let's try to run this program and see the result. For example 5, we enter 5. Now 5, that is 25. So remember that first of all, what we did, we basically declared the function. Now here I declared a variable, and then function is called, so the activity of the main function is stopped here. The control would directly transfer here. Here I have declared a single variable, then a message was printed to me, and then I entered 5. So 5 was stored in is. Now here the square, like s, is multiplied with s to calculate the square, and then with the return statement, okay, the control would be back to the main function along with the single value, that is 25. So this square, this thing will be replaced with a single value, which is 25. 25 will be stored in res, and then square is res. This is printed, square is 25. Okay, so this is how this return statement works. Let me give you another example of the addition function. Let's try to remove this. Okay, I'm going to write addition function. So this time I'm going to add two integer. I'm going to pass two integer values from the main function. Okay, and then the function add is going to return a single value back to the main function. So that's why I have to declare two variables here. okay, two variables, and then I'm going to assign values, for example 10, and b that's equal to 990, okay. So I'm going to use these two values, use these two variables, and these two variables would be passed to the add function. Now here I need another function, another variable to store the result, okay, res. So first of all I'm going to call this function, which is add, and I'm going to pass a and b. After this a single value will be printed, okay, and a plus b, a plus b, that's equal to res. Fine. So it will print me the value of a, and then plus the value of b, and then whatever is returned from the addition function. So let's try to write this function definition. Here I'm going to specify the formal arguments, okay. So x is going to receive the value which is stored in a, y is going to receive the value which is stored in b. So that's why we can write a simple statement like return x plus y. Now x plus y, the 10 and 990, it will be added, and then it will be returned back to the main function. So this value which is 1000, it will be stored in res, and here we are going to print the value of a, then b, and then res, which is 1000. So let's try to run this program and see the result. Now here you can see 10 plus 990, that is 1000, okay. So 1000 is printed with the help of this statement. Another way that you can use would be like integer z, okay. So you can write a statement x plus y, okay, and then return z, okay, return z, because x plus y will be stored in z. The value which is 1000, that will be returned back to here, and this will be replaced with this function call. 1000 will be stored in res, and then you can print the result like this, okay. So let's try to run this program again. Now you can see there is no difference between the two way of return the statements. Okay, now moving forward, I hope that you have learned the use of return statement. Now methods for passing arguments, another a very much important topic in programming. So there are two ways through which we can pass arguments to function. These are is under pass by value and pass by reference. First of all, we will see pass by value. Now all the programs that we did, that is the example of pass by value, because what we do in this way is, in this way of passing arguments to function, the actual values of variable passes to functions, okay. We are basically passing values. A photocopy of the values of the actual arguments has to be made to the formal arguments. Like in this case, you can see here, this is the example of the pass by value. Now we are basically passing these 10 and 990 to this function add, okay, like a and b. So this is the example of pass by value. Fine. It means we are passing the value through the argument to any function. Now this is the example, okay. Let's try to work on this example, pass by value example. Here we need to change the content of a and b. It means that we are going to swap the values of b into a and the value of a into b with the help of this pass by value arguments, okay. So for this I'm going to remove all the stuff, and I'm going to write a simple program for representing pass by value, okay, using name space std. Okay, so first of all I'm going to write the name of the function, that is change, and I'm going to pass two values from the main function to the change function. Now that's why I have to declare two variables here, integer a and b. In a I am going to store 10, and in b I am going to store 20. Fine. So first of all, I'm going to call the function change, and I'm going to pass these values to the change function. And after this, I'm going to print the values of a in actual argument, okay? In actual argument, because this is called actual argument, fine? So that's why we are going to print these values, okay? And now what happens? Value of uh, b an actual argument, okay? Value of b an actual argument. So we are going to print this b argument, okay? Argument value of a. Now after this, we're going to write the definition for this function. This is the definition, void change, okay? And we have to specify the formal arguments. Now this is formal arguments. It means the value of a will be stored in x, the value of b will be stored in y. It means we are going to pass two values, 10 and 20, to this function, okay? So in here, what we do, we are going to declare a temporary variable for storing the value of what? First of all, we will store the value of x in this temporary variable, okay? And then what we do is we're going to store the value of y to x, okay? Value of y to x, and after this, we're going to store the value which is stored in temporary, okay? In temporary variable in y. Now what happens? The value of a is what? That is 10. The value of b, that is also 20. So x will receive the value of a, which is 10, b will receive the value of, y will receive the value of b, which is 20. Now here I have declared temporary variable. So here what I did, I basically stored the value of x, which is 10, in temp variable, and then what I did, I took the value of y, which is 20, and I store it in x. So the new value of x becomes what? The new value of x becomes 20. Now what was stored in temp? We stored the value of x, which was 10. So 10 will be stored in y. Now the value will be changed, okay? So let's try to see that whether the values are changed or not, okay? Value of a in formal argument. Value of a in formal argument. Similarly, value of b in formal argument. Fine. So let's try to run this program. Now here the value of a, okay, I have to print the value of a in formal argument and the value of b in formal argument. Now let's try to run this again. Here you can see what I did. I basically changed the value, because in a what I had 10, in b I had 20. Now these are passed to x, so x has got the value of 10 and y has got the value of 20. Now what I did here, you can look at this, after calling this function, okay, the values are changed. So you can see the value of a in formal, this is 20. The value of b in formal, that is 10. But the value of a in actual argument still remains the same. It means we are unable to change these values, okay? We want to change these values, the formal values, through this way. But this is impossible through the function, through the pass by value mechanism. And let's try to see the drawback of this pass by value. The main drawback of passing arguments by value is that any change made in the formal arguments will not affect the actual arguments. Fine. So any change here, remember what we did, you can look at the result here. We changed the values, but it did not affect the actual values, okay? So as we saw in the previous example that we changed the values of x and y, which were formal arguments, but that change did not take place in the value of a and b, which were actual arguments. Like in this case, this is formal arguments, though the value of the formal arguments are changed, okay, but these values are still remains the same thing, okay. So what is the solution? So that we change the actual arguments, okay. So in this case, to solve this problem, we must use pass the arguments by their addresses instead of their values. So for this case, we need to have the concept of pointer. I have created the video on pointer. You can watch that video and then you would understand this example of this program, or pass by reference. So what is pass by reference? In this way of passing arguments to a function, we pass the addresses of the actual arguments to the formal arguments. What we do is, instead of passing values, we are passing addresses of the actual arguments to the formal arguments. Thus, any change occurs in the formal argument will also affect the actual argument, okay. Any change you bring in the formal, it means that you are directly accessing the addresses of the variables. In this case, we should use the pointers and the formal arguments so that to hold the addresses of the actual arguments. Also, in the prototype of the function, we should state this fig by putting stars, that address will pass to this function. So let's try to bring some changes in the same program. So because we're going to work on pointers, okay, so what we do is we're going to remove all this stuff and hash include IO stream, fine, and using name space std, and here again I want to change the actual argument. That's why I have to use the pointer, okay, to store the addresses, because we are going to pass the addresses of these arguments, fine. This means that this will hold the address, that the arguments or the formal arguments, okay, which we are going to specify in the function definition, it will hold, or it will take the address of the actual arguments. Main. Now first of all, we need to declare two variables, a and b. Then we are going to assign values b and now 20. Now what happens? We are going to pass the addresses, address of a and address of b, fine. After this, we need to print the values, that whether the change are impacted or not. Value of a in actual argument, okay, we are going to print this thing, and value of b in actual, because these are the actual argument, fine. So now what happens? We are now trying to define the function void change, okay. We are going to specify the pointer variable, so pointer x and pointer y, these are the pointer variables. And now what we do next, we're going to declare the same temporary variable, okay. And here what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to store the value which is stored in x. So how can I do this? I can do this with the reference, with the dereference operator, okay. It's going to take the value of 20, it's going to take the value which is stored in this, okay, and assign it to sum. After this, what we do is we are going to access the value at the address of x and the value at the address of y. So the value which is stored in y, that will be stored at the address of y, that will be stored here, fine. And then what happens after this, we're going to store the star y and then the temp. Remember, in order to understand this concept, you need to understand the pointer. For pointers, I have already created a video. Just go and watch that video and then you would have no difficulty in understanding this program. Okay, so now we can print the value of a in formal. Okay, in formal. So let's try to print the value of a, and let's try to print the value of b in formal. So the value of b in formal, that is what? That is this end line. Now remember, these values will be changed. So any change that we bring here, because we are accessing the addresses, okay? Now what happens? We are passing the address, okay? So this means that the instead of value, we are passing the address. Address of A is passed, address of B is passed, okay? And when the addresses are passed, these addresses are stored here in these pointer variable. The address of A is stored in the x pointer, in pointer x, and the address of B is stored in the pointer y. Here I have declared a temporary variable. Dereference is used, so we are going to, what is stored in x? In x we have stored the address of A. So we are going to directly access the address of A and fetch the value, store that value in temp, and then directly access the address of B, okay, because in Y we have stored the address of B. So access that address and fetch the value, store it in store it in the the address of A, because the address of A is stored in address of X. So that's why we are going to change this content this way. The temporary in temporary variable, what we did, we store the value which was basically in A. So that will be taken and that will be basically stored in the B, okay? Because in Y we have stored the address of B. So this is the general concept of the pass by reference. Now we have got, okay, we have got a problem, so now it is fixed. Now you can see the contents would be changed. Remember, first of all, what we did, we stored 10 and we stored 20, okay, in B. Now the addresses are passed and then function is called. When function is called, these values will be printed in the function definition. Value of A in formal, that is 20, value of B in formal, that is 10. And now you can look at the value of A in actual argument, okay, this is also changed. In A we stored 10, but here it is now 20. In B we stored 20, now it is 10. So this is how values are changed, because we are directly manipulating the addresses of these variable. So this is the example. Try to work on this example again and again, because this is a little bit tricky and you have to grasp the concept of this pass by address, which is basically not an easy thing to grasp, but you have to practice on it, and then you would be able to understand this concept completely. Now pass by reference, now any change occurs in the formal argument will also affect the actual argument, because in this case the photocopy of actual argument is not going to be made to the formal argument, while the real addresses are passing to the formal argument. So we are passing addresses instead of values. That's why any change we bring in formal arguments will also affect the actual arguments. Thus it removes the drawback of the pass by value mechanism. So that's it. Thank you very much for listening to this entire session. I hope that you have learned the arguments and parameters. I hope that now you have learned how to pass arguments to a function, and similarly what are the two different types of passing mechanism of arguments to functions. So one is pass by value, the other one is or call by value, the other one is pass by references or call by references. So what we do in the first, in pass by value, we are basically passing values, not addresses, but in references and pass by references, we are actually passing addresses, not values. So thank you very much. I hope that you have learned all these different topics. Thank you.